detectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small nut, a medium, let us escape from this tedium.
As we reach the end of the first year of our podcast, I want to reflect on some of the best moments that we've had. I feel incredibly lucky to meet some of the most amazing people who've told some amazing stories. They've really made me think. We're all about normalising the conversation about the paranormal as we begin to know the unknown. We've had disembodied spirits in the cemetery, a ghost boy in fact. We've had mysterious strangers knocking upstairs, distorting reality. We've had contacts with UFO, bar ghosts. We've had connected dreams. We've had mysterious meetings. We've had full-bodied manifestations. So many incredible things happen to people. I have a few more to share myself coming up soon, but for now, here are some things we've spoken about, and I hope you enjoy it. And we also have the full episode link for each of those saved down below as well. So stay tuned, there's a lot more to come from us in the near future.
Is there one particular instance where you think, okay, that was the first time I saw a UFO or the first time I met an entity? Is there one in particular that you've experienced firsthand?
Well, that's the beauty of this. Because I put myself in the very ballpark of where these things happen, you do tend, not always, but you do tend to experience these things. And probably the first thing that I experienced UFO-wise was when I was about 11 or 12 years of age. And that was in Scotland, and we were playing football in a school playing field. And I was just a young boy. I didn't know nothing about UFOs. A warm, sunny day, a rarity in Scotland, but it did happen that day. And we were playing a kickabout, playing football, and somebody shouted, "Whoa, what's that?" And we all looked up, and it was like an egg on its side, an egg shape, not standing up, but on its side. And even then, we were young enough to know that this wasn't an aircraft, that this wasn't a helicopter. And then after a few moments, my friends started kicking the ball about, apart from me. I'm still mesmerised by this. I'm wondering, what is it? And then I took my gaze away from it from a few seconds, looked up, and it was gone, typical.
At what point did you realise you're a medium? Like, what happened to you? Do you have an interesting story around that moment?
So I gave that some thought today, and honestly, Kieran, I cannot remember when I realised what I was. So if I can just share something that I kind of relate back to as like my own becoming aware, if that's okay. I'll make it short because I do yana quite a lot. But anyway, so I need to take you to my life. I was a foster child in an older family that, again, were quite religious people. And at the age of 5, I would go into the living room. I get my mum's, when I say mum, it's my foster mum's Bible. And all these people would come and sit on all the furniture and stand in the room. And I would stand in front of the fire at 5 and I would recite the Bible. And I did this every single day for as long as I could remember. But one thing that always sticks in my mind was my foster father came in and sat in the chair, and I was very upset because he was sitting on the man and he couldn't see the man. I could see the man, and I was apologising to the man, and I got quite upset, and obviously I got sent to my room. But I think if that's the question, when did I first realise? Not knowing, because I was only 5, I guess that would have been my first starting place.
That must be quite a shock. So do you mean you see manifestations of people when you say he sat on somebody that was in the chair? Yeah. All
the time. My biggest crashing down of my experience of my life as I was at school in where I grew up, Oxford, and seeing the people that were around and about that place in all different dress, looked different. Some of them spoke differently. And I asked a friend of mine, "Oh, look at that guy." And she goes, "What guy?" And I'm like, "But that guy." And I had this massive, and it made me, I always remember it because it made me feel really fearful. I was crying because I then couldn't understand what was wrong with me, because up until that time, I believed that everybody saw these other people.
How old were you, Penny?
At that point, I was about 15.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I would go off. I'd have people in my bedroom. We go out to places, I would see people that weren't there, relatives that weren't there. And I just didn't say anything because I just thought everybody saw the same thing. And I know that sounds absolutely mad, but that's my truth.
If you saw something, then that's real. That's real for you. And I need to hear what your experience is. And I think the pitfall here is when someone sees, I don't know, an apparition of some sort, whether they are religious or not, they may have had religious education training at school. So they tend to interpret those experiences through the filters of those religious teachings, even if they're not religious themselves. So if they see an apparition of some sort which frightened them, okay, that is demonic, because that scares me, even if they don't believe it themselves. So generally, it's very much about, I'm a firm advocate of meditation, because meditation helps to remove those filters so that I can see something for what it is, as opposed to what I think it might be. And that's why I think it's important to listen to children. Children are so pure, and they see things very differently to us. So when I used to babysit some children, they would, a group of children, they would always see the same kinds of things that the adults just wouldn't be able to see, but all the kids could see the same things. So I thought that's very interesting. And I actually got them to separately to draw what it is they were interacting with. And it was phenomenal. I mean, it was the colors, the shapes were all very consistent. And it was like these entities I didn't say entities, but these entities are our friends. And, they follow us into school. Grown-ups just think that they're our imaginary friends, but they're very real. So I used to love hearing children talk about their so-called imaginary friends.
The biggest thing, the most amazing thing that I have ever seen in my life, and how I wish you, Stan, and Christine, your colleague, had been there with me. Here is what happened. I was living in London at the time, and I was invited to go to this house in the outskirts of London because the strange things started to happen. So, long story short, I went along to this house, met the lady of the house, and she invited me upstairs, and we went into one of the back bedrooms, and there was a small glass cabinet, and about so high, with rings on the glass part of the cabinet and coins. I says, well, what's that? What are they? They're little tags on it. Oh, these are apports, Malcolm. These are, now, for those who don't know, an apport could be a coin, a medal, a ring, or something. It falls in. Just falls into the seance room or a haunted house, and you pick it up, and it's quite hot. It sounds preposterous, it sounds crazy, but there's so many instances of this, not just in the UK, but the world over. So that was interesting. She then took me into the other bedroom, and all it had was a small chest of drawers, a long, slim wardrobe with a red light on top of it, and in the corner of the room was a black curtain. As the corners meet, it was a curtain from one side to the other. And behind it was a chair. And I says, well, what's going on here? Oh, we will have a psychic medium who's going to come in, sit in the chair, and he's going to go into trance. And strange things will happen. And I went, wow, this is good. And so this man dutifully arrived about half an hour later. I padded him down to make sure he was not secreting any hidden devices, tape recorders, telescopic rods or anything like that. I knocked on the walls of the rooms to make sure there were no hidden cavities in the room, and also the floor, any recording equipment, nothing. I was convinced and happy that everything in that room was as it should be. I was sitting facing this curtain with three other researchers, just facing this. And then the lady of the house turned the light off. Now your eyes got adjusted to the semi-darkness because there was this red ambient light on top of this slim wardrobe, which cast a soft ambient red glow throughout the room. So your eyes got adjusted to see who was sitting there. You could see the black cloth. And the lady of the house put on old English songs like Roll Out the Barrel, just to create that atmosphere, to create the musical atmosphere for spirit to happen. So what happened next, and it'll come over as a story, but I saw this. I saw this. What happened next was a face moulded into the very fabric of this curtain and pushed out a few centimetres. You could see it blending in with the nose. It was horrible. And I'm thinking to myself, is this man doing this himself? But he had taken his shoes off and you could still see his white socks on the floor. And then at that point, there was this small chest of drawers which started to move. But prior to that, there were voices, spirit voices, male and female, coming up above your head, under your chin, next to your ear, all over. And I'm thinking, who's throwing their voice? Even though I believe in this, I'm still looking for logical answers. Who's throwing their voice? But my mates were still intrigued and mystified as I was. And there was these small little bells, little bells about so high, tacked onto the wall of this bedroom, and they started to tinkle away. Nobody was near them. And this small chest of drawers that was in the room started to vibrate. And it slowly rose up into the air, touched the ceiling, came across the ceiling and slowly dropped and hit my toes. I was astonished. I could not believe, how is this possible? And at this, and it sounds funny, but I can only tell the truth. I can only tell you what happens. A spirit voice boomed out in the room. Was Mr. Robinson impressed by this? And I said, I'd be more impressed if you took it back. We shall see what we can do, said the spirit voice. So I did the cardinal sin. I did something that no researcher should ever do, and that's try and stop psychic phenomena happening. Well, I did. I should never have done it, but I did. What I did was I hooked my finger under the lip of the small three-tiered chest of drawers and said to myself, you're going nowhere. You are going nowhere. Okay, take it away. Take it away. 1 minute went by, nothing. See, nothing's happening. 2 minutes, nothing. What? And I started to feel a pressure on my finger, and then nobody was near me, Stan. My friends were there. There were nobody to my right, only to my left, and nobody was there. I could see. And I was trying to pull this chest of drawers back, and I couldn't. It was like a hot knife through butter. Suddenly, this chest of drawers left my finger, rose up into the air, slowly transpired across the bedroom ceiling, and slowly and gingerly went back to where it was. And at that point, a terrific burst of cold wind pervaded the whole room. It was, if you can imagine, you're lying, with your swimwear in a beach in Barbados, you're hot, and then suddenly a big hand comes out the sky and throws you into one of these industrial freezers with the hooks of meat. That's how cold it got. Your breath was frosting up. I could see my breath freezing up in the air.
When my granny cook died, and in those days, many, many years ago, everyone used to sit round the bed waiting for him to die. And they was all sitting around my gran. I was 5 or 6, I'm not sure how old. But anyway, she was dying. And they was all hungry. So my cousin Terry went over to the chip shop and got 14 fish and chips. And come back. By the time he'd come back, she'd died. And no one wanted to eat then except my Aunt Aggie, who originally come from Leicester. And someone said she ate the lot. She was a big girl. But then I was coming home from school and everyone was around our house then. And I was aware, my gran comes to me. I said, oh, you're all better now, are you? And she said, tell your mum that Aunt Aggie ate all the fish and chips.
So you saw her?
I saw her, yeah. So when I got home and they were all crying, they said about, oh, Granny Cook died. I said, no, I've just seen her. Because my mum, being aware and knowing, she said, what did she say? So I told her, because everyone then started laughing, and because they know that she was still around.
I had a ghost experience probably around 8 years ago now, and that's completely changed my whole kind of view on life and everything. It kind of just thrown everything upside down. So I thought, yeah, I do believe in ghosts, but then had this one experience which just was like, there's definitely something. It's what I experienced. I know, you know what I mean? From that experience, I know now. I don't need to think, oh yeah, it's probably true, probably something to it. I know that there's something to it. So this was, like I say, about 8 years ago. And it comes back to poker again, actually. So it was in a pub in Northwich, in the northwest, in Cheshire. And it's like a pub poker night. Every Monday, you used to go and play the pub poker, so £5 each or whatever. We played in the back room of this pub, the Lord Eldon Inn, in Northwich. No, Knutsford, not Northwich, Knutsford. And we were in the back room. Unless you were playing poker, you wouldn't go into this room. It's just like a out of the way bit. There's some toilets in there which are just for us. There's no other way in or out apart from this one door to the bar. Like I say, unless you were playing poker, you had no reason to go into there. There's only about 5 of us left. And it's about 10:30 at night. And I was sat facing the table, and to my left was the door to the bar, about 10 feet away. And about 5 minutes earlier, the guy that runs the poker night has left. He had to go and care for his wife. And I saw the door to the bar open, and I saw somebody come back in. And I thought it was the guy that had left, maybe forgot something or was coming back for something. And I saw the person walk in, come and walk behind me and stand over my right-hand shoulder. And he said something to the table. But there's about 5 of us on the table, but nobody reacted to it. So I didn't want to be rude. So I turned to say, like, what did you say? So I turned, but there's nobody there. So I'm like looking behind me, like, where's he gone? And I said to my mate who was sat to my right, who's facing the door, I went, did Dave just come back in? Or did anybody just come in? She was like, no, nobody's come in. So I was like, huh. He looked at me, she went, you look like you've just seen a ghost. And I went, think I just have. It was so, like, I 100% saw somebody walk in, stand behind. I know you can feel someone in your personal space. She was stood right next to me. And I didn't hear the actual words, but I heard him say something to the table. And it was only because no one else reacted. I was like, no one's answering him. So I went to answer, and there was nobody there. And then upon looking into it, that pub's got quite a history of ghosts and stuff being seen. And there's like documented stories, and they do ghost hunts there and stuff in the past. I didn't know any of that. But when I've looked into it a bit more, I was like, huh. And I had that experience. That kind of, to me, I saw somebody walk in and say something and stand next to me.
Do you remember the rug dream?
It sounds, when I explain it to people, I laugh myself because it sounds so ridiculous.
It's so weird because, like, do you want to explain? Because I've explained it before. Do you want to tell your interpretation of it though? Because we may see things in different ways.
Yeah, I've got memories of it was various occasions, a couple of occasions, and I always remember this horrible sense of dread when I know I'm about to have this dream. I somehow know I'm about to have it while I'm asleep. Horrible sense of dread. And I laugh because it sounds so ridiculous, this dream. This dream I had, it was this dark room, and I'm the only person in the room, and I've got the most humongous rug or like blanket, woolen blanket, really heavy, and I'm desperately trying to fold it, and it's too big for the room, and it's so overwhelming. But not just that, kind of it's floating in the air, and I'm having to kind of hold it up with my arms. And at the time, it was the most scariest dream. And then I'd wake up and think, oh, thank God that was a dream, because it was so real and vivid. Then I thought, what? So scared. And then, a bit of time would pass and I think, why was that scary? And then I actually start laughing because it's so ridiculous. And I kept having these dreams.
But how come you didn't tell anybody at the time?
I don't know. I just thought, I don't know. What they'd think of me, that I was weirdo, or need to seek some mental health help, or I've been watching TV films. But it was, I can't describe it. Just the absolute sense of dread, like a panic attack.
Yeah.
As the dream, the dream starts very slowly, and then the feeling of the blanket gets heavier and heavier.
I'm going to blow your mind with something in a moment. But yeah, basically, yeah, because I had exactly the same dream for years. I mean, I think it started when I was about roughly about 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old, and I'd have it like once or twice a week, like consistently for like years. It was only until I don't know why I called you, but something told me to call you because I hadn't told anybody. Because initially I didn't tell my mum when we were younger because with her being a single parent, she had enough to deal with it as it is. Like she was barely keeping a roof over our heads, and but yeah, eventually I kind of told you, okay, I'm going to tell you this basically. This is completely mad. And it just blew my mind when you said, I've had exactly the same specific dream. It's not as if we both had dreams about, teeth falling out, for example, which is a common dream to have if you're all feeling anxious. Specific dream with a specific feeling. And that absolutely blew my mind. But I can ask you as well, when we had that conversation, did you have that dream again?
No, I didn't. I
Yeah, neither
didn't
did
have.
I.
I had it. It
It
was
just
a.
ended.
Yeah, it just stopped. I think on a couple of occasions I remember. What was it? I don't know if I was sleepwalking, but suddenly I was stood at my window in my bedroom brushing my teeth. So on occasions it would make me kind of sleepwalk at times.
Yeah. I wonder who was doing all the rugs and all the washing in the night. We woke up with like 1,000 folded towels. It was great.
It sounds so silly and bizarre, but at the time it was just the most frightening dream to have.
My mum told me this story, which really sort of shocked me really. And so they were listening to the radio, the wireless, she called it back then. It was a quite a windy night, probably a little bit stormy. She said, you can set in the scene here really for like a typical horror story or a ghost story. At the time, my grandmother was hard of hearing until she had an operation many years later to correct her hearing. So her hearing wasn't great. So they were all listening to the radio, and because my grandmother was quite hard of hearing, she was closest to the radio on the table. So they used to have it on the big wooden table in the middle of the room. And they were all listening to the radio. And then suddenly from upstairs, my mother told me and her two brothers at the time, heard like a massive bang on the floor. And they thought maybe something had fell over in the bedroom, like a lamp or something had fell over. And they all looked up, except my grandmother, because she was hard near and she was listening to the radio. She didn't hear what was going on. And after the bang, there come like another bang. She said, and this bang was almost like the house literally shook in its foundations. And my grandmother looked at my mum and my two uncles, Jack and Jim, and they were pointing up like that. And she was going like this, and she didn't really take much notice of them, and she just sort of carried on listening to the radio. After the bang, literally a minute later, they heard something or someone being dragging across the floor up in the bedroom. She said it was almost like someone was dragging something it was wood on wood. So it was almost like someone was dragging a leg, because you could hear a stomp and a stomp and a like that. So it was like a one person. It was definitely one person. They were dragging something. Either they were dragging a chair or they were dragging something else. And it got louder and louder. By this time, my mum and Jack and Jim were absolutely freaking out. They were pulling on my grandmother, but she sort of like played it down. She like was a bit cool. So she was a cool gran, you know what I mean? So she sort of like didn't really acknowledge it at all, which freaked them out even more because it got closer to the door up the stairs. And then it got to the door, it stopped. The door at the top of the stairs then flew open They heard it flew open. It hit the wall. The thing then dragged itself to the top of the stairs, took one step down on the stairs, and then my mum said it fell down the stairs. So you heard it fall down.
Wow.
And then it hit the door at the bottom of the stairs. And the whole frame, my mum said, just shook. Just literally shook. And by this time, my grandmother had heard that, and she got up. And she stood quite close to the door. My mum and my two uncles were completely losing their minds. Then the door began to creak, like there was pressure on the door. And if you can imagine a woman that's about 9 months pregnant, okay, the door was completely straight, my mum said, but halfway down, below the bolt, because they had a big old metal bolt on the big latch and bolt on the door, it began to bow out. And it bowed out and out, and it bowed out, so almost like the door was halfway down straight, and then it bowed out like that at the bottom. And it literally was like the wood, almost like it expanded, almost like it stretched. My mum said she said she remembers it so vividly because she could see the grain of the wood separating, and she could hear it cracking, and the frame of the door was beginning to lose its strength. She said the latch on the door was lifting slightly with the pressure, and then suddenly it just bounced back like a big rubber band, and it then cascaded like a waterfall. She said she remembers it was like a wave. It just went like almost like in a, you know, when you see the adverts with the people in the wave and they're going through the wave and that's on the surfboard. That's what it looked like. So it was basically like almost like a circle. The door at the bottom, the top of the door was completely fine, normal door. But at the bottom of the door, it went like a circle, almost like in a wave, and then it went doom. It almost like someone switched the light on, and it went completely hard, straight, the door.
That's fascinating. Is that something that just your grandparent saw, or were there other people?
My grandmother saw it, my mother saw it, and my two uncles saw it. And so many, many years later, I spoke to sadly, my grandparents and my mother and both my uncles now all passed away. But I had spoken to them about that. And you know what the crazy thing about it is? They all tell you the same story, and it never changes. Their recollection is exactly the same. I could ask my mum a year late, 5 years ago about it when she was alive. I asked my uncle a couple of months ago before he died. He died on Christmas Eve last year. If I was to go and ask him, they would tell exactly the same story. Their stories would be almost word for word what I'm telling you now.
I was compiling headstones down at a cemetery in a village called St. Earth, which is a lovely little village. It's more like a hamlet. Where the church is situated, it's down the bottom of the hill, whereas all the housing is at the top of the hill. That will make sense to you in a bit. It was a lovely summer's evening. My husband used to go and do it with me because we used to talk into a dictaphone, as it was then, read out all the headstones. I'd go home, type them up, send them to RootsWeb, and they'd be published in booklets and sent around the world. So this particular evening, which was a summer's evening, I would say it would have been about June, July time, and it was a good maybe 15 years ago now. Time goes on. We went down to St. Earth, and we walked in through the gate where they have the stone where they put the coffins when they bring them in. And the first thing I noticed to the right was a graveyard for plague victims from the 15 and 1600s, which was quite interesting. And then I walked up the path and the old church was there. Around the inside of the walls of the church were all these headstones, which were sort of 1500s and whatever. And because they'd fallen over, they'd attached them to the walls of the church so that they weren't destroyed and people could find them. So that's where I started doing my dictation while my husband went to the left of the cemetery. I got about halfway through them and someone asked me, I heard a voice to my left say, "What are you doing?" And I'm not really a kid fan. I've never had them, so they just don't interest me. And I turned around and there was a child stood to my left. And I thought, is he going to a fancy dress or something? Because if you think about the film Oliver and what an urchin would look like, that's what he looked like. He had like slip-on cloth shoes. He was very pale. He had like serge brown trousers on, which finished sort of between his knee and his ankle. And he had like a creamy linen shirt on, brown hair, very dark brown eyes. And he was carrying like a metal pole, which I don't know what it was for, but it reminded me of something that you would pick rubbish up with like a spike on the end of it. And I said to him, oh, well, I'm just, this recording machine of mine was still running. I said to him, I'm just collecting all the headstones and things, recording them. So he said, why? So I explained why, because they go into booklets and are sent around the world so that people who can't afford to come to the UK can find their families and know where they're buried. It gives them a sense of growing their families, if you like. And he just kept saying, why? And it started to really naff me off, to be honest, because I was trying to we had like a couple of hours of really good light and I just wanted to get on with it. So I said, look, I ain't being funny. I won't tell you exactly what I said, but I said, will you go away? So I turned around to look at what I was doing and I turned back and he'd gone. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, I got rid of him, lovely, and carry on. So I finished around the church. And I shouted over to my husband, did you see that kid? And he said, yeah, I saw a kid like near you and over there somewhere mooching around. So I said, oh, he was getting on my nerves. So I said, never mind, we'll carry on. So we was working our way up the cemetery and I said to my husband, isn't it lovely that the cemetery goes all the way back and behind the wall at the top, there's no housing, there's nothing, there's just fields. And he said, yeah, it's unusual sort of these days, and thought no more of it, carried on with what I was doing. And I came to a crypt, but above ground crypt that had 6 slates on it, well, 5 slates because one was missing. And I started again talking into my dictaphone, listing who was in this grave. And again, I heard this voice, this time to the right of me, say, you have to find who's in the missing, like, slate. And it was this kid again. And I said, well, I can't find it, can I? Because it's missing. And I said, I've already told you go away. I said, I've got to get on with this tonight because otherwise I've got to travel all the way, 4 miles back down the road to carry on another day. And he said, no, you have to find out whose name that is. So I said, look, you can see on the ground, there's no slate on the ground. It's obviously been tidied up. There's no way that from here tonight, I can find out who's in that grave. And he just kept on. You really must find out. You really must find out. And I said, look, I've told you once. I ain't going to keep saying it. Just go away. Let me get on with what I'm doing. So I turned around, looked at the gravestone, turned back, and he was gone. And I thought at the time, oh, he's hiding somewhere or playing in the churchyard, or he ain't dressed like that, you know. I mean, it wasn't a fancy dress thing, obviously, and he didn't have any friends around. It was just in the churchyard. There was me, my husband, and this child that kept appearing. So I turned around and said to my husband, that kid just turned up again. And he said, well, I didn't see it that time. I said, well, I did. And I was doing this headstone or crypt, and he kept on about me finding out who the missing person was. So I turned around and looked back to the back of the churchyard, and I said to Barry, where have those roofs come from? And he said, what roof? I said, look. So he looked, and at behind the wall, at the back of the churchyard, were all these roofs. There were houses there. But both of us, when we went in, saw there was nothing there. And we couldn't get our heads around how 1 minute they're not there, and the next minute there's like a bungalow estate on the other side of this wall. And I said to Barry, I think we're both going mad. I said, they must. And he said, they weren't. There was nothing there. And I said, well, I think we've sort of finished for tonight. I think we ought to go home. So we went to go out of the cemetery, and the gate was locked. So, and we couldn't undo it. So we had to scale the hedge of the cemetery to get out. I didn't see the child anymore. I was moaning about him all the way home. And I got home, and my husband said, I'm going to go up and see Lynn and Pete, which were two friends of ours, and I'll be back in a minute. I suppose you can't wait to start transcribing this tape. So I said, yeah, I'll just get on with it. I said, that blasted kid will be, I hope I can still hear what I'm saying over this child. So I pressed play, and I started typing it out, and it came to the bit where I was talking to him the first time, and you could hear me, but he wasn't on it. I could hear my husband over the other side of the cemetery talking into his machine, but the child was not on the tape. So I thought, well, that's weird. So I carried on with what I was doing, got to the bit where I was by the crypt, and I could hear me again talking to this child, but he wasn't on it. And this started to really freak me out then. So I rang up my husband at my friend's, and I said, will you come home? I said, because there's something ain't right. And he said, what is it? I said, the kid isn't on the tape. And he should have been, because I can hear you. And it was a brand new tape, and he was stood right next to me. So he came home, and he brought my friends down with him. And I was a bit shook up by then. And my friend, said to me, well, perhaps he's on the other side of the tape. I said, well, only use one side of it. It's a brand new tape. And she said, well, just turn it over and just see if there's anything on the other side of the tape. She said, I don't know, just do it. So I turned this tape over. Nobody else could have fiddled with it or anything, because it was with me all the time. And it started playing. And first of all, for a minute or so, there was nothing. And she said, what do you think it was? This kid, what do you think it was? And this voice came out of the tape, and it was like guttural. First of all, it started reciting a children's nursery rhyme. And it was like that. And the nursery rhyme was Hickory Dickory Dock. And then she said, well, what is it? And this voice said, you will never know. And me and my friend, we just panic. So I went down to my husband and said, you've got to listen to this. And he heard it, and he couldn't make any sense out of it. And I said, oh, I don't know what's going on. And we had a few glasses of wine after that. And I got up the next morning, and I thought, I'm going to play that again. And it wasn't there. It had gone. But so to me, that child was a ghost, because we both saw it, but it didn't record on the machine. Neither of us saw him leave, or disappear, or anything like that. We just turned around, and 1 minute he was there, and the next minute he was gone.
Choice, sharing dreams and blowing off steam. We'll lend you a hand, we'll to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope, birthed from the unknown. Who you gonna call? I'm not a ghostbuster, no proton packs, just crossing streams of knowledge. It's not so scary when things get hairy. It's not the paranormal, just future normal. Breaking barriers, no longer the carrier, releasing the fear and replacing it with knowledge. Understanding each other, we uncover a whole new point of view within you. Paranormal perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope, birthed from the unknown. The only stream we need to cross is the platforms to get the message across. Knowing each other, sister to brother, no ghost or spirit or demon will ever get the better of this medium. Paranormal perspectives, we're here to inspect it. I'm a small, not a medium. Let us escape from this tedium, learning from each other, breaking barriers, a message of hope, birthed